Is it okay for the church to get involved in the public arena? Should Christians be actively involved in the free elections of the United States of America? Faith Wins is an organization dedicated to engaging pastors, congregations, and Christians in the public arena. Why, you may ask? Because the influence of Christians needs to be felt around this country. Jesus is the solution, and we need to bring biblical solutions to the marketplace of ideas before it's too late, and we need to do it now. There are over 80 million eligible Christian voters in this country, but only 30 million regularly participate in the elections. This needs to change, and Chad Connelly is going to tell you why in just a minute. Check us out online at faithwins.us. That's faithwins.us. When we sit on the sidelines and hope for a better future, the enemy wins. When we mobilize, register, and make our voices heard, faith wins every time. Hey, thanks for tuning in today to the Faith Wins podcast with Faith Wins founder, Chad Connelly. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Chad, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here, brother. Great to see you, man.
Well, okay, so I'm excited to hear this story. You wanted to talk about really the legacy. You know, you spend your life traveling across the country, talking with faith leaders and pastors, and I know that must be super special. Are you encouraged when you're done with your meetings, when you meet with pastors? And I want to talk about your involvement in your son, but just talk about that first. When you're done meeting with pastors across the country, do you walk away encouraged?
Man, I really do. I honestly think there's an awakening going on right now, Jim. People are realizing they don't just need to get involved, they have to get involved. The things going on are beyond what anybody would have thought. So I leave there fired up. There's always, I got to tell you the story about a pastor in Wisconsin.
Okay.
He is the prototype to me, because we were hosting a meeting in Wisconsin, I don't know, several months ago. And he came up and he allowed us to use his church. He didn't want to be involved in the luncheon. He was too busy, but he came up to me and I was thanking him for letting us use his venue. I think we had 45 pastors there. And he said, "Chad, happy to have you here. Oh, thank you so much, Pastor. We appreciate it." I said, I hope you get to sit in the meeting. He said, and I knew he had told people he couldn't. He said, "I'm just too busy. I'm sorry, but your buddy who's on your team, the pastor, is one of my best friends." And he said, "I can trust you." I said, "Well, I sure hope so. And thank you. And I sure hope you can stick around." He said, "I guess I'm just skeptical about this." I said, "What are you skeptical about, Pastor?" He said, "Well, just the whole political thing." I said, "Do you think I want you to be political?" He said, "Yeah, I guess so." And I said, no, I just want you to be biblical." He said, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "You need to stick around for my talk and David Barton's talk on American Christian history." He said, "Gosh, I wish I could." Well, I looked out. He stayed for my whole 12, 15 minutes. He stayed for David's whole 40-something minutes.
Awesome.
He comes up to me afterwards. He grabs me by the arm and he said, "Chad, I'm sold. I want to be ground zero for everything you're doing in Wisconsin. You know, Virginia, we didn't tell people who to vote for in 21. There's a whole different governor. The past governor was cheering when they wrote a new law and passed it to let babies that survived abortions die comfortably, just evil. The new governor prayed in Jesus' name. That's a 180. But you know what we did? We picked 10 state house districts to run up the score. I told my pastor buddies, I want you to find every church in this district who wants to do voter registration, and let's just tell them to maximize it. I told them that my line, I double dog dare you to trust me. I don't need you to charge the beach at D-Day, but can you register everybody in your church to vote? And can you make sure they vote biblical values? 2 things. That's it. Can you do those 2 things? And we found 312 churches. Jim, we're now doing that in New Jersey. New Jersey, the People's Republic. I believe there are a lot of dormant votes sitting in churches where people think it's too far gone in my state, I can't make a difference.
Right, I can't make a difference.
Yeah. Matrix in Michigan, there were 13 close house districts where an anti-biblical person voted and beat a pro-biblical, pro-life, whatever person. And so I've told my people in Michigan, I have 4 pastor buddies in Michigan, I want you to find 25 churches in all these areas and let's run up the score. I believe that's how you change things. It's not about a party or a candidate. It's about issues that align with our biblical worldview. That's what makes a difference. And I can tell those stories in any state you want to pick all day long. It happens everywhere we go. So yes, I am super encouraged by what I'm seeing.
Any state? Any state? All right, let's hear a good. I want to hear a good one out of California and out of New York, and then we'll move on.
Probably can't help you in Vermont. Yeah, I can help you in California. I got a bunch of pastor buddies in California. Pastor Peter Mord from Palmdale, California, young guy, probably 32, 34. You know, Peter found 243 churches in 22 that did voter registration in the Antelope Valley alone. And one helped win some congressional races because he turned people out to vote, helped win voter ballot issues. Voter registration matters. It helps and it makes a big difference. Probably can't help much in Vermont. Hadn't done a lot there. New Hampshire, a couple weeks ago, we had a pastor that wouldn't let me buy breakfast. They feast for breakfast. They even had grits, Jim.
In New Hampshire?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. They knew I was coming. They had sausage gravy, man.
Wow. What about New York? Tell us something good coming out of New York. Come on.
You know, I had a donor call me that does work in New York. We didn't have much time, but you know those congressionals that flipped in New York? We found 111 churches in specific areas of New York State to do voter registration, and it made a difference. We'd love to do a whole lot more. You know, New York State's kind of, Alabama, except for New York City, right? Very conservative. But people give up. They think my vote doesn't count when it really does. It makes a big difference if they turn out and vote.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation because it feels like it doesn't matter. It feels like even if I vote and I get 1 million of my friends to vote, they'll find some way to make it so that I don't win. But you're encouraging us here today. I mean, it's good. Yeah. Chad, we
actually recruited poll workers in 9 states last time. It's a whole other conversation we ought to have at some point. But there are people in your church. I'm talking straight up pastors, deacons, Sunday school teachers. There are people in your church right now who are frustrated at what's going on. It could be the border. It could be Israel, the way we're treating Israel now. It can be the international scene. It could be life issues. It could be traditional marriage. It can be this boys get to wrestle against girls and swim against biological women. It can be any of those issues. There are people in your church who want to make a difference and do not know how. I know how. Let me help.
So let's talk about that because really in today's world, we've shoved the elders of our society off to the sides where we desperately need them to come and pour their lives into the youngsters. Do you see that the political leaders of today are investing their lives in the political leaders of tomorrow? Do we see that faith and that mantle being passed on?
I really do. And not just in churches with pastors, but I'll tell you a personal story with my son, Bennett. This just warms my heart. I love this story. I haven't shared it very much. I need to share it more. So when Bennett was 5.5, his mom died, committed suicide, and Bennett was still kind of mommy's boy. He was really close to Michelle. It affected Bennett deeply. I mean, it was tough. Bennett he saw something nobody should ever see, your mom in a pool of blood. Well, a year later, I meet Dana. We get married. Dana becomes mom. I think Michelle will always be mommy to Bennett, and CJ too. But Bennett especially, he was just 5.5 when his mom died. So Dana and I have been married less than a year. And we got this thing going on in 2008 called a presidential election. And I had taught the boys who we pull for based on teams, sports teams. I'm a Clemson guy. It's an easy analogy. And it didn't make it about R or D. It made it about teams, right? And so we're driving down our main street in our little town toward our church in Newberry, South Carolina. There's a deacon buddy of mine who is on the other team. And I love the guy. He was an old blue dog, conservative, but sorry about that. He voted the wrong way about everything because he was just one of those old throwbacks, Mr. Jim. And I love Mr. Jim. He's in heaven now. When my wife died, Jim was one of the first people to come love on me and my boys. We just disagreed on political stuff. He never saw the transformation going on out there on the social issues like I did. And so we went by Mr. Jim's house, and Mr. Jim's got a sign for the other team's candidate. And Bennett was 7.5. This was 2008. And Bennett said, "Dad, Mr. Jim's got the other team's sign in his yard. What's wrong with Mr. Jim?" So, Bennett, I've talked to Mr. Jim till I'm blue in the face, and he's just an old conservative one of those. And he said, "Now, why don't we like that team, Dad?" I said, "Well, there's a lot of reasons I don't like that team, but the biggest one for me is abortion." Bennett says, 7.5-year-old question. 7.5-year-old says, "What's abortion?" I said, "Well, Bennett, that's when they kill babies in mommy's tummies." He says, "They what? They kill babies in mommy's tummies? That's awful." Yeah, it's awful. And so Bennett goes to our little private school the next day, and he decides he should tell some others. So Bennett stands up in the lunchroom at our little academy, and there's 30 or 40 kids in the room. And Bennett says, "We don't vote for that team because they kill babies in mommy's tummies," which creates some questions. The teacher who was on lunch duty calls the headmaster, who calls Dana, who calls me at work and says, "Guess what Bennett said in the lunchroom? What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm buying that kid an ice cream cone tonight. He's got this thing straight." So forward. That's awesome, isn't it? So fast forward a few years. 2 years ago, Bennett and his now fiance, that he's getting married in a couple months, which is, wow, hard to believe. They started a group at Clemson called Tigers for Life. So on a Saturday morning, and these kids would, every couple Saturdays, they'd pool their poverty and they'd rent a big tall ladder because the abortion clinic bought big, tall fences because the kids were going out there praying for the girls who were getting an abortion. They were praying for the babies. So Bennett and Olivia Grace rent these big, tall ladders. And on a Saturday morning in May, a couple of years ago, my 20-year-old son calls me so excited. "Dad, you don't believe what happened today." I said, "What, buddy?" He said, "A girl saw us praying at the abortion clinic and decided not to kill her baby." That makes for a proud daddy.
Oh, yeah.
That boy, train up a child, Proverbs 22:6, in the way he should go. When they're old, they won't depart from it. And there's Bennett. He's running an abortion, an anti-abortion, pro-life group on a college campus. They've had things thrown at them. They go to Library Bridge at Clemson every week, and they hand out cookies and tracts and just try to talk to people about the pro-life message that every life matters. They have been vilified. They've been trashed, done awful things. I hate my kids had to see that. But you know what? I've been dragging him to political things his entire life, Jim. When I was state party chairman, he got to hang out with presidential candidates as a 12-year-old. And so that stuff makes an impression. I would just encourage you, get your kids involved. When you go vote, let them see you go vote. When you do voter registration at your church, let them help you out. Let them pull tables or set up chairs or whatever works. But get your kids involved in the process. Man, we have an intentional plan at Faith Wins to reach those pastors under 40. In fact, I'm planning a trip with my buddy Joel Rosenberg. I got to handpick 20 pastors from all over the country under 40, and we're going to Israel in August. So they'll have an appreciation for the Holy Land and have a head and heart connection to where Jesus walked and the importance of the nation of Israel and how we as Americans have a responsibility to bless Israel and not curse it like a lot of people in our nation are doing. And so, yes, there's a legacy. Absolutely, there's a legacy, and you ought to be a part of it with your kids too.
You're listening to Faith Wins with Chad Connelly. We'll be right back. Make sure you check us out online while we're on break. faithwins.org.
Go to faithwins.org.
People of faith, do not underestimate your influence.
You can influence policy decisions and elect public servants with a grounded biblical view who will stand for religious freedom,
support traditional marriage and the family,
defend and support Israel,
a voice for the unborn,
people who will defend our republic and secure our elections.
If believers won't step up to the plate and get involved, who will?
Who will?
Who will?
Who will?
Who will?
Who will?
who will.
You know, it's really not about politics or party or politicians or personality. It's about policies and principles that most closely align with our biblical worldview, from the courthouse to the state house to the White House and beyond.
Hey, welcome back to Faith Wins with Chad Connelly. You know, Chad, as we're talking about that legacy, pouring our lives into the next generation, and politically, we need to raise up an army of young people interested in political pursuits who love Jesus, who understand the kingdom, and who absolutely know that biblical values are the strongest values that our nation can be built on. So here's my question. Which one of your children who've been raised up in a political household, which one can give you a run for the money next time you run for governor in South Carolina?
I see, I have 4. Dana had 2 and I had 2. My oldest, CJ, he loves speaking in front of people. He's really good on his feet, great people skills. He's using his college degree, working in Nashville in packaging science, but he's dabbling around the political sphere, volunteering. That's exactly what I think he ought to do. Our oldest daughter, Leah, is an occupational therapist, and she has such a servant's heart. I can see her in the mission field one day. I don't think she wants to do politics, though. Leah's the one who'll text me late at night. She's watching a show on TV or checking out a political angle or hearing a candidate, and she'll text me and ask about it. And then Bennett, I told the story about the pro-life Bennett and what he's done. I can absolutely see Bennett running. He has actually just got hired on by a super PAC for a presidential campaign. He graduated from Clemson on Friday, whatever that May the 4th was, and the following Monday he started a job with a super PAC for a presidential campaign. Bennett will probably be the one that'll run first. And then our youngest daughter, Summer's got a year to go at Clemson. She's a marketing major, and she's such a great people skills person. I can see her doing it too. But Bennett would be the first one, I think.
All right, we got a couple minutes left in this segment. Let me ask you a personal question. You travel across the country. You're feeding into pastors, encouraging pastors, which is therefore encouraging congregations all over the place. But you got a marriage to Dana. What are you doing? Because people are watching you and like, with Chad Connelly, he's got a lot of influence. What are you doing to make sure your marriage doesn't get compromised by your work?
Yeah, 100%. My relationship to God's number one in my life. I'm rarely gone on Sundays. I teach a little Sunday school class. We've got 35 to 45 people at my Baptist church in Newberry. I'm very, very committed to that. I probably miss 5 or 6 Sundays a year. And that's my first thing is I want to be disciplined enough. I want to set that example that my church matters. I need to be fed too.
Okay, you're off track. You're such a political candidate. I asked about Dana. I don't get Sunday schools. No, don't get to it. We started with Dana. Let's go. Dana's a way.
You got to cover your relationship with God first. Number 2 is after my relationship with the Lord is Dana. And Dana's traveling with me now a lot more. She quit her substitute teaching jobs to the little private school close by so that she can go with me when she wants to. The kids are out of the house. And so Dana and I date regularly. We went on a date last night. We got a date night tonight. We're not going to the conference event that we've got. I speak on Thursday. So she and I flew from home to Orlando on Sunday. We fly from here to Nashville on Wednesday, and we'll be there together until Friday. And we spend a lot of time together. We do at least one trip per quarter that's just us. We do our anniversary trip every year. That's usually a pretty big deal. Went to Durango, Colorado last year. We're just going to Charleston, South Carolina, and we got a beach Verbo this year. That's just our time. And so we do a date night a week or a date lunch a week. We do a quarterly trip that's just us. It's a night or 2 away where we just focus on each other, and we spend an awful lot of time together. I work out of the house. So when I'm home, we go to lunch together, go to breakfast together, we go for walks together, we pray together. That's a big priority for me.
And you heard it from Chad Connelly right here at Faith Wins on our podcast, faithwins.org, faithwins.org. When we come back, we're going to hear some of the stories of how you can raise up your children to be prepared for running for political office, because we need your kids to be running for president in 30 years. You're listening to Faith Wins Podcast. We'll be right back.
Go to faithwins.org.
In just a few short years, we've engaged with over 50,000 faith leaders from all 50 states. We've done hundreds of meetings with some of America's leading congressmen, senators, political thought leaders, pastors, and more. And most importantly, we've actually registered over 1 million new evangelical voters during an unprecedented time, an unparalleled success, and all accomplished with just a part-time team. People ask me all the time, what's the secret? It's God's ordained from the pulpit to the pews, committed to faith, family, and freedom. Because with Him, all things are possible.
Hey, welcome back to Faith Wins with Chad Connelly. Chad, we're talking about passing on the baton to the next generation, and there's something in the body of Christ in America. We're not doing a great job of that. It's certainly passing our faith on. We need to pass the baton on in so many ways, and we need to get intergenerational contact. We've got an 80-year-old president, and we've got candidates running for president that are 40. We need to get all of these generations together, feeding the upcoming generations, because we need some powerful leaders to come up. Let's just talk about when you talk to so many people, you talk to pastors, you hear their stories, and boy, they have rough lives because they've got 400 bosses in every church. Do you hear any common themes when it comes to regret, when it comes to their children?
I do. Look, I travel a lot. I'm with pastors almost every day. And a lot of times, and I know I have a unique view, and I think God's let me do some really just humbling things. And one of them is I kind of have gotten to where a lot of them just share, they pour their hearts out to me. I guess I'm in and out and I'm there with them for, a day and a half or 2 days, and I get to know them. We're driving around, going to meetings. We spend a lot of time together and we share, we pray, we laugh, we cry together. And a lot of them will share frustrations. Jim, I don't, one of them said, you're kind of like a counselor to preachers, and I'm not qualified to be that. And that's a very humbling characterization. I want to be there for them. I know it's very lonely. You know this. Leadership's lonely. Anytime you're doing something that makes you raise your head above the crowd, somebody's going to throw tomatoes at you. They're going to, get angry or whatever, and you can't please them all. And pastors, I think, they're just always on. They don't ever get a time off. Oh, hey, we have the Boy Scout thing. The pastor's here. Would you pray? They're never off. You run into your pastor at Walmart at midnight. He's trying to get a jug of milk because his wife called him, and somebody stops him and, hey, pastor, I know Friday's your sermon day, but my next door neighbor's best friend's third cousin's getting his Eagle Scout, and if you can go, it's only 3.5 hours one way. It would mean a lot. And I know that's an exaggeration, but my pastor is my buddy and mentor and confidant, and I know what they put up with. I get a unique view. So they're burdened. They're overwhelmed. Most of them they take it all on their shoulders. So I hope I can be a resource and an encouragement that way. And yeah, the answer is yes, yes, and yes, and yes, and amen.
So the next generation, certainly the Gen Zers, the millennials, they looked at things differently. Now the Gen Zers, they look at things even more differently. The digital gen, how can we be prepared in the church and in politics to interact with them as they grow into our future leaders? Because, I'm Generation Xer guy. They're kind of flyover land. Nobody even cares about us. But the next presidential candidates likely are going to come out of, the millennial crowd. You've got DeSantis, you got Scott. Those guys are both millennials as candidates. How do we prepare to interact with them and encourage them and lift them up and surround them with great wisdom?
I don't know if I have the answer to that, but I know a lot of pastors are going through this, trying to train the next generation. I think you got to find communicators within their generation to let them talk face to face. And there's so much division. It's media driven. It's social media driven. The characterization of the group. We're all Americans. We're all Christians. The only division God has is, do you believe or you don't believe? It's sheep and goats. It's I'm going to heaven or I'm not kind of thing. But yet society divides us into colors and races and backgrounds and ethnicities and genders.
Well, and let's talk about that in the next podcast. I want to talk about civil discourse in the next podcast. So let's get back to how we're preparing this next generation.
The struggle is we got to find duplicators within that generation to prepare that generation. So it's one reason we're selecting 20 pastors under 40 to go to Israel to build relationships, because I'm trying to duplicate myself. I need some mini me's. And I found a bunch of them they're qualified. They're great. It's another reason I'm bringing David Barton around to get your point is when they learn the truth, Jim, they got to do something with it. And so I think we have been intentional to try to find younger pastors. So there were 61 pastors last year in 17 states that I teamed up with that were my go-to guys. Of those 61 pastors, 40 were under 40. So we've been very intentional about making sure we're partnering with, we're training, We're spending time with younger pastors. That's scriptural. We're supposed to admonish and bring them around and exhort them, coach them, if you will. So we're being intentional. I think every ministry has got to be intentional to find duplicators, like mine, committed Christians, because I think we need those people in that generation to best deliver the message to that generation.
That's a great idea. And that's what we've done with missions around the world. We've raised up local indigenous people to minister to their own people. That makes sense. So you're talking about raising up indigenous people within the generations. That's a great idea. All right, so let's just say that somebody's listening to the podcast today and they're like, I want to be one of those people. I want to help interpret old people language into millennial language, or the Gen Zer language, or into the digital gen language. How do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, if they go to faithwins.org, and there's a way there to sign up for our newsletters, emails, podcasts, or whatever. And there's a message thing there, and you just tell me. Look, we have people sign that all the time because they want to host a David Barton meeting and what we call the American Restoration Tour. They want me to come in and speak. They want to volunteer their church for a venue. So the same thing occurs. And I think it's just basic principles. We've got to be intentional to reach those people. And if you want to be a part of that, we believe that osmosis of hanging around and, you sleep with dogs, you wake up with fleas. But if you hang around people who are going somewhere and their righteousness exalteth the nation is their attitude, then that's going to rub off too. And so, that you are who you hang around kind of thing. So we're trying to create fellowship with those groups. And like I said, 40 of our guys last year are under 40. I've been with new pastors. I just met a 32-year-old pastor in New Hampshire named Jimmy that I'm just fired up about, because he's like, Chad, what can I do? How do I do this? I mentioned the guy in California a little bit ago. I'm with a young pastor in South Carolina the other day who I don't know, I bet he's not 35, but he falls in the same category. He's an associate pastor at a big church with about 1,000 people just north of Columbia. He's starting a thing called Palmetto Leads, where we're going to train young people, not just for the ministry, but for the political world, for the business world. And I'm going to speak at that event. I helped him line up speakers for his DC event that's coming up in a couple months. So we're being very intentional about this because we don't think it's going to happen by accident, Jim.
And we need you involved at Faith Wins. Go check us out online, faithwins.org. No matter your age, you could be 12 and get involved with us. No, you can't vote, but you can get prepared to vote, because 6 years from now, we'll need your vote then too. But start to learn. That's when I started learning about politics, when I was 12 years old. Faithwins.org, faithwins.org. Chad Connelly, great conversation about passing on to the next generations. Thank you, Chad. And remember, when you register to vote and then you vote your biblical values, Faith wins. Hey, thanks for listening to the Faith Wins podcast with Faith Wins founder, Chad Connelly. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, and I want to ask you to check out Faith Wins online at faithwins.us. That's faithwins.us. Your vote is needed and necessary, and we all need to learn to engage in our system of free elections right here in the United States of America. If you're not registered to vote, please take time to do so on your local county voter registration website and do it today. In an upcoming election, vote for candidates supporting biblical values and a biblical worldview. Until next time, remember, when Christians engage in the public arena, faith wins.